Welcome back, adventurers, to D&D Deep Dive. We're diving deep into the world of Greyhawk again, this time to a place practically overflowing with mystery and danger. The Vale of the Mage. This is episode 20, just in case you're wondering.
Nice.
But yeah, picture this, a hidden valley tucked away within the imposing barrier peaks,
Right.
whispers of potent magic, tough guardians, and a mage so reclusive he makes hermits look social. That's the Vale of the Mage.
Yeah. It's wild how this seemingly isolated vale is actually connected to the greater political landscape of the Flannis.
Oh, definitely.
You've got power players like Bissell, Grand March, Jeff, Stench, Ket, even Valuna,
Wow.
all aware of the vale and its mysterious ruler. But here's the thing, none of them want to mess with it. It's like a giant do not disturb sign over the whole
Yeah,
place.
it makes you wonder what's really going on in there, right?
Sure.
And our source material drops us right in the thick of it. You, the listener, are on a mission, tasked by the Margrave of Bissell himself to investigate a group of necromancers who have set up shop in the Vale.
Oh, interesting.
Clearly, Bissell is a little nervous about these guys potentially joining forces with the Vale's ruler, or even worse,
Yeah.
staging a coup and grabbing all this sweet magical knowledge for themselves.
Right. It's not just some simple dungeon crawl. It's full of political tension.
Right.
Like a wizarding Cold War with undead thrown in for good measure.
Okay, but before we get to the necromancer drama, we need to talk about the Vale itself. This isn't just some random patch of wilderness. We're talking about the barrier peaks. Hard to get to. Then you add in those rumors. Powerful magic, dangerous guardians. It's practically begging for an adventure.
Absolutely. And it's not just the location. The Vale's inhabitants are a story in themselves. You've got your typical valley elves, known for their archery and, let's be honest, their knack for borrowing magical items. Then you have the gnomes, illusionists and pranksters. But don't let their antics fool you. They're crucial to the Vale's defense. And of course, the tree people, descendants of outcasts who've become formidable protectors.
Like a fantasy version of those isolated tribe documentaries.
Right.
Just way more magic and way less reality TV drama. But the source material makes it clear that this isn't a place for beginners. They actually suggest a well-rounded party of 7th to 9th level adventurers. That's not exactly a casual stroll in the park.
Nope, not at all. The Vale's defenses are serious business. Magical traps, all kinds of creatures, both natural and magically engineered. This place is locked down tight, and for good reason.
So we've got political intrigue, a mix of fantastical inhabitants, and enough danger to make even a seasoned adventurer sweat. Let's meet the guy at the center of it all. The Vale's mysterious ruler. He's got a few names. Jason Crimea, the Exalted One, the Black One, the Mage of the Vale. Seriously, the guy needs a publicist.
Seems like he prefers to stay hidden. But from what we can gather, Crimea is a classic fallen hero story. A powerful mage banished from the Great Kingdom for trying to take the throne. Now he's holed up in the Vale, obsessed with magic and guarding his domain with an iron fist.
Well, he's clearly a talented mage. The source material even hints at him creating new spells, some of which could be pretty useful in a 5th edition game. Imagine a spell like Unmask to reveal hidden creatures or illusions. That would be a lifesaver, especially for players like me who always seem to walk into traps.
I hear you there. His spell, the Exalted Eye, is another interesting one. Basically, Wizard Eye on steroids. Imagine a surveillance network covering the entire Vale. He can see and hear practically anything going on.
Okay, that's officially creepy. Give me some Big Brother vibes. Just more wizards and fewer cameras.
Right. But here's where it gets interesting. There are glimpses of something, well, human, beneath all that power and isolation. The source material mentions a diary entry where he expresses real affection for the first protector, Tyson San. He even says she might be the only one he truly loves. It makes you wonder about the man behind the curtain.
All right, let's talk about this first protector then. Tyson San, a drow wizard, not your average second in command. She oversees the Vale's defenses and shares Crimea's thirst for magical knowledge.
Her backstory is pretty fascinating, too. A former member of the Vault of the Drow, she was forced to flee to the surface after her family tried to overthrow the priestesses of Lolth. That didn't go so well. Found refuge in the Vale, becoming Crimea's most trusted lieutenant. It's a classic redemption arc, but with a dark twist.
And their relationship is anything but simple. There's definitely a romantic connection, but also a respect for his need for solitude. She doesn't pry, which is probably smart considering his power.
Oh, yeah. But don't underestimate her own power. She's a 9th level conjurer specializing in summoning. In a campaign, she could be a real challenge or a powerful ally, depending on how things play out.
Speaking of playing out, let's move on to the other inhabitants. starting with the Valley elves,
Yes.
the quintessential woodland warriors,
Hmm.
fiercely loyal to Crimea and always on guard against intruders.
Their leader, Summerstorm Nightwind, is a great example of that warrior spirit. He's a cleric, deeply connected to nature, personally training the elves who patrol the Vale. He even organizes those borrowing expeditions we talked about, raids on caravans to bring back magical goodies for Crimea.
Talk about a dedicated follower. But there's more to him than just brute strength. He's got a secret artistic side. Sketches the Vale and its inhabitants, apparently trying to emulate Crimea's own artistic talent,
Yeah.
which, according to the source material, is pretty impressive. It's a
Oh.
cool detail that adds some depth to his character.
Shows he's not all about fighting. He appreciates beauty, tries to create it himself, makes you wonder if that's something he connects with Crimea on. A shared love of art amidst all the chaos and magic.
Interesting thought. And then, of course, we have the gnomes, always up to something, these mischievous tricksters,
Yeah.
using illusions for everything from pranks on the elves to actually defending the Vale.
Mm-hmm.
And Doble, the gnome illusionist, is a perfect example.
Mhm.
He's obsessed with learning new spells and collecting magical items. Imagine him always lurking around Crimea, hoping to pick up a few arcane secrets.
Like that friend who always wants to peek at your character sheet during a D&D game.
Right. But in Doble's not all fun and games. He takes defending the Vale seriously, even uses his apparatus of Qualish to patrol the area, although I suspect it's more for style than practicality. Why walk when you can fly around in a magical contraption, right?
Exactly. And speaking of practicality, let's not forget the tree people. Descendants of outcasts who've adapted to the Vale's environment, skilled with bows and blowguns, and they use some nasty poisons to defend their territory.
Sounds like they'd fit right into a modern 5th edition campaign. Could easily be a ranger-heavy group focused on stealth and nature magic.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And their leader, Zert, he's a fascinating guy, a real pragmatist, believes in strength above all else. He's constantly training his people, preparing for a possible invasion from the Great Kingdom. He even uses ritual combat to determine leadership within their communities. Brutal, but it speaks to their focus on survival.
Yeah. You get the sense that Zert sees what's coming, and he's not going down without a fight.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. There's this underlying tension between the tree people and the Vale's other inhabitants. The elves and gnomes kind of look down on them because of their, shall we say, less refined way of speaking and their simple lifestyle.
A clash of cultures within an already diverse Vale highlights the challenges of coexisting in such a strange, isolated place.
Definitely adds another layer to the whole dynamic. But let's not forget why you, the listener, are even in the Vale in the first place. Those pesky necromancers.
Ah, yes, our antagonists. This group of power-hungry spellcasters led by Elok, a 12th level necromancer with his sights set on overthrowing Crimea and taking control of the Vale's magic. Ambition, thy name is Elok.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Hmm.
Because it's not just about stopping the bad guys. It's about navigating those moral gray areas. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, you have Crimea, a powerful mage, but with a questionable past. On the other hand, the necromancers, a clear and present danger with ambitions that go way beyond the Vale. So who do you side with?
That's the question, isn't it?
But let's break down these necromancers a bit more. Elok is the mastermind, but each member brings something unique to the table. You've got Nairu, the strategist, always thinking several steps ahead. Then there's Albion, the diviner, drawn to forbidden knowledge and power.
Right.
And we can't forget Tracy, the fighter necromancer, trying to prove herself, like sibling rivalry, but with necromancy.
Interesting.
Then there's Promise, the cleric. He seems a bit out of his depth, like he's been dragged into all this against his will. And last but not least, Red, the deceptive fighter, pretending to be a mage, the muscle, but enjoying the perks of being seen as a powerful spellcaster. It's a classic D&D party setup, wouldn't you say? Tank, damage dealer, support, face.
Except they're all on the wrong side.
So how do these necromancers fit into the Vale's defenses? They're not just hanging out in the woods, are they?
No, they've actually managed to infiltrate Crimea's old stronghold, the Citadel. The place is like a textbook example of a paranoid mage's architectural masterpiece.
What, like magical wards and stuff?
Oh, you better believe it. Magical wards, poison needles, pit traps, the whole 9 yards. Not to mention the regenerating blindness and deafness glyphs. Talk about a rude awakening.
Can you imagine the frustration? You finally get past a trap, your senses come back, and bam, back to square one.
Yeah. It says a lot about Crimea's mindset. Even though he's abandoned the Citadel, it's still heavily guarded.
So these necromancers are either incredibly skilled or incredibly foolish to hole up there.
Maybe a bit of both. They've managed to get their hands on some of his research. They're actively trying to figure out his secrets, figure out how to take him down.
Okay, so now we've got this three-way standoff brewing. Crimea, the necromancers, and you, the adventurer, caught in the middle. What's your next move?
Well, before we get to that, let's take a closer look at the Citadel itself. It's more than just a death trap. It's a treasure trove of Crimea's past, full of remnants of his life before the Veil.
Good point. The Citadel is a story waiting to be told.
Exactly. So imagine you've gotten past those initial defenses.
Yeah.
The magical wards, the grists, think magically animated gargoyles, but even scarier, and the grivelings, stone creatures that can shape stone to some extent. Imagine them just blending into the walls. You enter the Citadel, what do you find?
I'm picturing dusty old books, weird alchemical ingredients, maybe a few cobwebs thrown in for good measure. You know, classic wizard lair stuff.
Oh, you'll find those for sure. The library's overflowing with ancient tomes on history, magic, you name it. But there's also an art studio filled with portraits of people from Crimea's past. Family, friends, maybe even rivals from his days in the Great Kingdom. It paints a picture of a man who wasn't always a recluse. A man who had connections, relationships, a life outside the Veil.
It just adds another layer to the mystery. What made him leave all that behind? What secrets are hidden in those portraits?
Exactly. And then there's the mirror room. Imagine a room lined with mirrors where Crimea practiced his illusions. Eerie, unsettling, but also fascinating. You get the feeling it was more than just practice. It was self-reflection, maybe even a way to confront his inner demons.
Like a haunted funhouse designed by a mage. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. But the Citadel is just one piece of the puzzle. The Veil itself is a whole other beast, filled with strange creatures and challenges you won't find anywhere else.
Oh, absolutely. The source material mentions encounters with the Jakar, for instance. This creature was once a druid, but now it can change into any animal form thanks to a magical collar.
Wow.
Imagine the possibilities. One minute it's a wolf, the next a bear, or even a swarm of insects.
Wild.
It's a challenging encounter, but it also opens up opportunities for some creative role-playing.
The question is this shape-shifting natural, or is it because of Crimea's magic?
Right.
The source material leaves it open to interpretation,
Yeah.
which I think is great. It lets the DM use the Jakar in their campaign in so many different ways.
Exactly. And then there's the Gelida bird, a monstrous hybrid of an ape and an eagle. Crimea created it himself. Talk about a terrifying sight.
Yeah.
It shows Crimea's mastery of magic, but also his ambition, his willingness to push the boundaries of nature.
Makes you wonder what other creatures he's created lurking out there in the Veil.
Right.
But let's not forget the natural inhabitants either. The source material mentions encounters with Chorids, nature spirits who can manipulate stone. They could be valuable allies, sharing information about the Veil and its secrets.
But they're also known for their mischievous side, right? Their magical laughter can be pretty debilitating.
So players need to tread carefully. Offending a chord could have some nasty consequences. It's a reminder that even in a place as magical as the Veil, not every creature is friendly.
True.
Speaking of not so friendly, the source material mentions mountain dwarves guarding the passes into the Veil. They're allies of Crimea. Could be a problem for anyone trying to enter or leave without permission.
Adds another layer of complexity. Do you try to sneak past, bribe them, or maybe appeal to their sense of duty? Warn them about the necromancer threat.
So many choices, so many possible outcomes, a DM's dream. But let's get back to the heart of it all. You, the adventurer, are in the Veil to deal with these necromancers. How does the Citadel play into that?
Okay, so picture this. You've fought your way through the Citadel's defenses, survived the traps and guardians, and finally confronted the necromancers. You discover they've been studying Crimea's research, trying to unlock the secrets of his magic and his defenses.
So it's not just about stopping them, it's about preventing them from getting even more powerful.
Exactly.
And that's where the moral dilemma comes in. Do you side with Crimea, a powerful but maybe dangerous mage, against these necromancers who threaten the surrounding nations?
It's a classic D&D choice, the lesser of two evils.
And the source material doesn't give any easy answers. It lays out the facts, the personalities, the motivations, and leaves it up to the players and the DM to decide how the story goes.
That's what makes it so compelling.
Right.
It's not a prepackaged adventure. It's a world of possibilities.
And the Veil itself reflects that. Beautiful, but dangerous. Ancient magic and natural wonders side by side with deadly traps and monstrous creations.
Absolutely.
Sounds like the perfect setting for a campaign that blends epic fantasy with a bit of gritty realism.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And speaking of the Vale's wonders, the source material mentions a magical glade where Crimea used to conduct his elemental experiments. It's a place of both opportunity and danger, just like the Vale itself.
Ooh, what kind of opportunities are we talking about? Is that where I find the +3 flaming sword I've been dreaming of?
Well, maybe not a flaming sword, but there is a pool of fire that could be used to forge magical items or power up spells.
Nice.
Of course, there's the risk of setting the whole glade on fire if you're not careful.
So, high risk, high reward. Sounds about right for the Vale.
Then there's the pool of water, controlled by a water weird. Could be a source of healing, or it could turn into a nasty encounter, depending on the water weird's mood.
It's like even the good forces of nature can be unpredictable.
Definitely.
Even dangerous.
And let's not forget the mud pit that grants stat boosts. But there's a catch. You might gain strength, but lose dexterity, for example. That classic risk-reward scenario that could tempt players with the promise of power.
Like a magical slot machine with much higher stakes.
Exactly. And then there's the shimmering teleportation portal, left over from Crimea's attempts to master teleportation magic. It could be a quick escape route, or it could lead you to an even more dangerous part of the Vale.
So, a gamble, just like everything else in this place.
It seems Crimea likes to leave behind those unpredictable surprises.
Speaking of surprises, we had to talk about that Chakar again. The shape-shifting druid. Imagine the role-playing potential.
Mm-hmm.
Does the party try to capture it, reason with it, or maybe even help it break free from that magical collar controlling its transformations?
It's a moral dilemma wrapped in fur, feathers, or scales, depending on what form the Jakar takes.
And then there's the Gelida bird, that monstrous ape-eagle hybrid, a creature that embodies both the wonder and the terror of the Vale.
It's a testament to Crimea's power, but also a warning sign. He's not afraid to experiment with life itself, to reshape nature as he sees fit.
Makes you wonder, if he can create a Gelida bird, what else is he capable of?
And how far will he go to protect the Vale and his secrets?
We've uncovered a lot about the Vale of the Mage, but it feels like we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Sure, yeah.
Hidden agendas, potential alliances, and the big question of what you, the adventurer, will do with all this information.
It's a choose-your-own-adventure story, with consequences that could affect the entire Flaness.
Exactly. And the source material gives Dungeon Masters a ton of inspiration to create a truly memorable campaign.
Speaking of Dungeon Masters, let's talk about bringing the Vale of the Mage to life in a 5th edition game.
Good idea. First things first, we need to convert those creature stats, right?
Definitely. Gotta make sure the Jakar and the Gelida bird are appropriately scary for a modern-day party.
But it's more than just numbers.
Oh, yeah.
It's about capturing the atmosphere, that feeling of unease that hangs over the Vale.
Right. Think dense forests, eerie whispers on the wind, all that good stuff.
And let's not forget the rumors and legends about Crimea. Let the players uncover pieces of his past. Figure out how he went from ambitious mage to the reclusive guardian of the Vale.
Good point.
And those moral dilemmas we talked about.
Mm.
Give the players choices with no easy answers. Do they side with Crimea despite his shady past? Try to negotiate with the necromancers, knowing they might cause a disaster?
Those choices should have real consequences, shaping the whole campaign and the fate of the Vale.
It's a great way to explore themes of power, ambition, and the corrupting influence of magic.
And remember, the Vale's inhabitants aren't just background noise. Each group, the Valley elves, gnomes, tree people, they all have their own goals and motivations. They could be valuable allies, or they could become obstacles, depending on how the players treat them.
A good reminder that even in a fantastical setting like the Vale, actions have consequences. Speaking of actions, what about those encounters? The source material mentions crocodiles, baboons, even a giant Gelida bird. But these shouldn't just be random fights.
Right, use them to show off the Vale's unique environment and challenge the players in new ways.
Like maybe they have to get through a swamp full of giant crocodiles. Or outsmart a troop of baboons to find a hidden shrine.
Exactly. Or maybe they stumble upon the Gelida bird's nest guarded by the creature itself.
Yikes.
The point is to make these encounters memorable, tie them into the story of the campaign.
Don't be afraid to get creative either.
Oh, yeah.
Adapt the source material to fit your campaign setting and your players.
Absolutely. The Vale of the Mage is a sandbox, a starting point for endless adventures.
I like that.
It's a place where the classic D&D tropes, elves, dwarves, magic, monsters, are all mixed together in a fresh, exciting way.
So if you're a dungeon master looking for a setting rich in history, lore, and potential for adventure, the Vale of the Mage is worth checking out.
It'll challenge your players, spark their imaginations, and leave them wanting more.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive into the Vale of the Mage. We hope you enjoyed this journey into one of the most intriguing and dangerous parts of the World of Greyhawk.
Until next time, may your dice rolls be ever in your favor. Well, you'll find those, definitely. The library is just overflowing with ancient tomes on history, magic, you name it. But there's also an art studio full of portraits of people from Crimea's past.
Oh, really?
Family, friends, maybe even rivals from his days in the Great Kingdom. It shows a different side of him, you know? A man who wasn't always a recluse, a man who had connections, relationships, a life outside the Vale.
Yeah, it adds to the mystery, doesn't it? What made him turn his back on it all? What's hidden in those portraits?
Exactly. And then there's this room. It's called the Mirror Room.
Oh, that sounds creepy.
Picture a space lined with mirrors where Crimea used to practice his illusions. It's eerie, unsettling, but also kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
You get the sense that it wasn't just practice. It was like a form of self-reflection for him. Maybe even a way to confront his inner demons or something.
It's like a haunted funhouse, but designed by a mage.
Right.
Okay, I'm getting chills. But the Citadel's just one part of it. The Vale itself is a whole other challenge, right? Full of strange creatures and stuff you won't find anywhere else.
Oh, absolutely. The source material talks about encounters with the Jakar, for example.
The Jakar, remind me.
It was once a druid, but now it can shift into any animal form.
Wow.
Thanks to this magical collar. One minute you're facing a wolf, the next it's a bear, maybe even a swarm of insects. Pretty wild, right?
Yeah, that's intense. Sounds like a tough encounter, but also a chance for some fun role-playing.
Definitely.
But is that shape-shifting ability natural, or is it something Crimea did? The source material leaves it kind of open.
Yeah, it does.
Which is great, actually. It gives the DM a lot of flexibility. They can work the Jakar into their campaign however they want.
Exactly. And then there's the Gelida bird, a monstrous hybrid of an ape and an eagle. Crimea created it himself.
Okay, now that's terrifying.
Right, it really shows off his mastery of magic, but also his ambition, his willingness to push the boundaries of nature.
Makes you wonder what other creatures he's made, just waiting out there in the Vale.
Now, let's not forget the Vale's natural inhabitants. The source material mentions encounters with Khorids, nature spirits who can manipulate stone.
Oh, right.
They could be great allies, sharing info about the Vale and its secrets, but they're also known to be a bit mischievous. Their magical laughter, it can be pretty debilitating.
Yeah, players need to be careful. Offending a chord could lead to some really bad outcomes. Even in a magical place like the Vale, not every creature is friendly.
True. And speaking of not so friendly, the source material mentions mountain dwarves guarding the passes into the Vale. They're allies of Crimea, which could cause problems for anyone trying to sneak in or out.
Adds another layer of challenge to the whole thing. Do you try to avoid them, bribe them, or maybe even try to warn them about the necromancer threat?
Right. So many choices.
So many possibilities. It's great for DMs. But let's get back to the main reason you're in the Vale, the necromancers. How does the Citadel factor into all of this?
So picture this. You've fought your way through the Citadel's defenses, you've survived the traps, the guardians, and you finally reached the necromancers.
Oh.
You discover that they've been poring over Crimea's research, trying to unlock the secrets of his magic.
And his defenses?
Exactly. So it's not just about stopping them, it's about preventing them from becoming even more powerful.
And that's where that moral dilemma comes in, right?
Yeah.
Do you side with Crimea, a powerful mage with a shady past, against these necromancers who are a threat to everyone else?
The classic choice. Picking the lesser of two evils.
Tough one.
The source material doesn't make it easy. It gives you the facts, the personalities, the motivations, and leaves the decision up to the players and the DM.
That's what makes it so interesting, though.
Right.
It's not a prepackaged adventure. It's a world full of possibilities.
And the Vale itself reflects that. Beautiful and dangerous. Ancient magic and natural wonders existing alongside deadly traps and monstrous creations.
It's the perfect setting for a campaign that mixes epic fantasy with a bit of grit and realism.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And speaking of the Vale's wonders, the source material mentions a magical glade where Crimea used to experiment with elemental magic. It's a place of both opportunity and danger, just like the Vale itself.
Ooh, a magical glade. What kind of opportunities are we talking about here? Is this where I finally find that +3 flaming sword I've been after?
Well, maybe not a flaming sword, but there is a pool of fire that could be used to forge magical items or fuel powerful spells.
Nice.
But of course, there's always the risk of setting the whole glade on fire if you're not careful.
So high risk, high reward. Sounds about right for this place.
Right. And then there's this pool of water, controlled by a water weird. It could be a source of healing or a really nasty encounter, depending on the water weird's mood.
I guess even the good forces of nature can be unpredictable
Mm.
and dangerous.
Oh, definitely. And let's not forget the mud pit that gives you stat boosts.
That boost.
But there's a catch, of course. You might gain strength but lose dexterity, for example. It's a gamble. That classic risk-reward scenario that could tempt players with the promise of power.
Like a magical slot machine, but with much higher stakes.
Exactly. And then there's the shimmering teleportation portal, left over from Crimea's experiments with teleportation magic. It could be a quick escape route, or it could lead to an even more dangerous part of the Vale.
So it's a gamble, just like everything else in this place.
Seems like Crimea really enjoys leaving behind those unpredictable surprises.
Speaking of surprises, we have to talk about that Jakar again, the shape-shifting druid. So many role-playing possibilities there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Does the party try to capture it, reason with it, maybe even help it break free from that magical collar that controls its transformations?
It's a moral dilemma with fur, feathers, or scales, depending on what form the Jakar takes.
It really is. And then there's the Gelita bird, that crazy ape-eagle hybrid. It's a creature that represents both the wonder and the terror of the Vale.
It's a sign of Crimea's power, but also a warning. He's not afraid to mess with life itself, to change nature, to suit his will.
If he can create a Gelita bird, what else can he do?
And how far will he go to protect the Vale and his secrets?
That's a good question. We've learned a lot about the Vale of the Mage so far,
We have.
but it feels like we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to discover. Hidden agendas, potential alliances,
Absolutely.
and that big question of what you, the adventurer, will do with all this information.
Yeah, it's a choose-your-own-adventure, all right, with consequences that could have a huge impact on the Phalans.
No kidding? And the source material really gives Dungeon Masters a lot to work with. A ton of inspiration for a really memorable campaign.
Speaking of Dungeon Masters, let's talk about how to actually bring the Veil of the Mage to life in a 5th edition D&D game.
Okay, so first things first, got to convert those creature stats.
Oh, definitely. We got to make sure those Jakar and Gelita birds are scary enough for a modern party.
But it's not just the numbers. It's about creating the right atmosphere, that feeling of unease that hangs over the Vale.
Exactly. Think, like, dense forests, creepy whispers in the wind, that kind of vibe.
Gotcha.
Play up the rumors and legends about Crimea, let the players discover pieces of his past, figure out how he went from ambitious mage to the hermit-like guardian of the Vale.
And don't forget about those moral dilemmas we talked about. Give the players choices with no easy answers. Should they side with Crimea, even with his questionable past? Try to make a deal with the necromancers, knowing it could backfire.
Yeah, those choices should have real weight. They should shape the campaign, even the fate of the Vale.
It's a good chance to explore themes of power, ambition, and what magic can do to a person.
And remember, the people who live in the Vale, they're not just background noise. Each group, the Valley Elves, the gnomes, the tree people, they all have their own agendas, their own reasons for being there. They could be allies or obstacles, depending on how the players interact with them.
Another good reminder that actions have consequences, even in a fantastical place like the Vale.
Absolutely.
So speaking of actions, what about encounters? We've got crocodiles, baboons, even a giant Gelita bird.
Right, but don't just make them random fights.
Right.
Use them to show off how unique the Vale is. Challenge the players in interesting ways.
Okay, so what do you have in mind?
Well, maybe they have to cross a dangerous swamp full of giant crocodiles. Or outsmart a group of baboons to find a hidden place.
Maybe even find the Gelita bird's nest, with the bird itself standing guard.
Exactly. Make these encounters memorable. Tie them into the story of the campaign.
And don't be afraid to get creative. Adapt the source material to fit your game and your players.
Absolutely. The Vale of the Mage is like a sandbox, a starting point for a ton of adventures.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
It's a place where all those classic D&D elements, elves, dwarves, magic monsters, come together in a way that feels fresh and exciting.
Well, if you're a dungeon master looking for a setting that's full of history, lore, and possibilities for adventure, the Vale of the Mage is definitely worth considering.
It'll challenge your players, get their imaginations going, and keep them coming back for more.
I couldn't agree more. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the Vale of the Mage.
It does.
We hope you enjoyed exploring one of the most interesting and dangerous places in the world of Greyhawk.
Until next time, may your dice rolls be in your favor.
And may your adventures be legendary.